Hello. And so what I've been doing, again, super casual, been going around interviewing people for the podcast that I'm launching. And no one really knows the name of the podcast yet because I haven't made it public. But what I am trying to do, because I have all these, I'm always in rooms where conversations are being had that I'm like, oh my God, I wish we could put this on Instagram and like let other people into, what's actually happening around us. And so the purpose of this podcast is to really capture stories, the lessons from top performers, visionaries, entrepreneurs around, how are they navigating challenges, overcoming imposter syndrome in order to achieve like their highest level of success. And success looks different for everyone. And so that's what this podcast is about, to give you sort of, a synopsis. So before we get started, can you let the audience know in your own words who you are and what type of business you run?
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Mandy Bowman. I am the founder and CEO of Official Black Wall Street. Official Black Wall Street is the largest app and digital platform connecting consumers to Black-owned businesses and then also providing Black founders with different resources so that they can grow.
And when and why did you start this business? Because there's a lot of platforms, maybe when you had began that were out there. What made you say, you know what, this is how this platform is going to be different? What differentiates Official Black Wall Street?
So in the very beginning, I would say we were one of the first platforms and apps in this area. But for me, there were so many different features that I wanted to add into OBWS. I wanted to make it location centric so that, businesses that are brick and mortar can receive support, since we know, especially with COVID, so much can happen when it comes to that. But even so, in the very beginning, for me, this was like a passion project. So I didn't even go into this thinking this is going to be my full-time position. At that point in time, I had just learned about Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I'm from Bed-Stuy in Brooklyn, New York. And so my neighborhood had changed so much. Like, there were tons of Black-owned businesses, and it's like every single year they were closing down. So I was like, okay, well, I can't give them funds. The least I can do is go there and shop with them. So that's kind of how the idea came about.
Now, you talked about Tulsa, and I know many people don't know the history behind that. And so can you share a little bit about the significance of Tulsa?
Yeah, I actually didn't learn about Tulsa until maybe years after college, which is so crazy because it's such a big part of American history. But Tulsa, Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma, it was an historic neighborhood, a Black neighborhood, one of the most prosperous neighborhoods in our history. So it was lined with Black-owned businesses, everything from hospitals to Black-owned pharmacies. It was super self-sufficient. And then we know that it was destroyed with during the Red Summer in 1921, where racists basically came through and destroyed the whole thing. So it was a massive part of our history, and people still draw inspiration from it.
Now, people listening in right now, because we just gave them a lot of information about who you are, the type of business you're building, and the significance of, why you're building this type of business. Now, let's take a step back, right? And let's go into, because you said this was a project, passion project, and it turned into a business. So can you remember what you were doing during that time? Were you working in corporate? Were you in college where you said, oh, let me start this passion project? Where were you at that time?
Okay, so this was like a few years after graduating college. I was at my dream job, which at that point in time was in the music industry. So I was at Atlantic Records in digital marketing. And then during this time, it was also the Michael Brown incident. And so I remember going into work and then logging into Twitter, and then the whole day, all I would do was just refresh, just keeping up with what was going on in Ferguson. And I was stressed. And so this was the only thing that made me feel like I was doing something or, helping the culture and the community in some way.
So while at your job, so this wasn't something you said, you know what, I'm going to quit my job, walk out of here, go march at the protest and go start this business. You said, you know what, here's an opportunity. I could solve a problem,
Mm-hmm.
and I could also use the resources of where I'm at,
Mm-hmm.
and I think, as entrepreneurs that are starting businesses, sometimes they don't realize that, the best businesses solve problems.
Mm-hmm.
You saw something going in the community and you said, well, I need to make my contribution. I need to make an impact.
Right.
And then we wrap that back into Tulsa, you know, you're basically, when I look at official Black Wall Street, and you could go look at the Instagram, if they're not at 1 million by now,
We're
as the time of
close.
you're listening to this episode, they will be at 1 million people that's engaged and following them. You're essentially building Tulsa online.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it feels
Digital
like.
Tulsa, little digital Black Wall Street.
And so, and when we look at the online, markets.
Mm-hmm.
So one, how are you building an ecosystem of other online businesses and bringing them together online? That's the first question.
Okay. All right. I'll take that one. One, the biggest thing in the very beginning was creating or compiling as many Black-owned businesses as possible, so that this could be resourceful for customers. So I made sure that we had content going. And I think the biggest thing was starting small. So it wasn't like I started out and was like, yeah, I'm going to make this app and then we're going to have all these other things. I literally just started some social media pages and was like, okay, I'm going to share some businesses. And that helped us grow this community. Back then, it was just me. I got so accustomed to saying us and we when it was just me. But for me, it was like fostering that community and building that up, so that even when I launched the website in 2015, we probably had like 100,000 followers already, a little bit more than that. So it was kind of aggregating all of everything that the customers would be interested in or the community would be interested in, and then building that community at the same time.
I think like a lot of people that are in the community, they always say it's hard to find these Black businesses, and I think that's what your platform does a really, really good job of, putting a centralized place where you could search based on what you're looking for. Now, when you were starting your business, did you get a grant, or did you have an uncle that gave you $1 million?
That would be
loan?
nice. I'm still looking for that rich uncle. So if he's out there. No, when I first started, so I launched a Kickstarter because I wanted to go into app development, and I realized apps are super expensive. And I think the quotes that we were getting at that time, which now seem like a lot less money, but it was like around $30,000, $50,000, which of course I didn't have that laying around. So in order to raise the money, I launched that Kickstarter. And of course, when you're building something, things happen. So it was a lot more than that. I cleared out my 401k,
Wow.
and then used the Kickstarter money for it.
And for those of you that don't know, Kickstarter is like a fundraising platform where you put out your idea and you have a set amount of days to raise the funds for that idea. And if you don't raise it, like your promise is you're going to give the money back to the customers. And so what was that number, and did you hit it?
The number was $30,000. And so then I raised $33,595. I'll never forget that number. And that was the most stressful time in my life, because I was working full-time at Essence, and I had just started that job. So getting, on the ground running, that was a lot. Running a crowdfunding campaign is a full-time job. I didn't realize that. And then running a business, again, after work, it felt like I was juggling 3 different jobs.
So why did you not say, well, let me leave my job? Right. I made $33,000. Like, let me leave my job. What made you decide to stay? Because you said this was a very stressful time. So people are celebrating, you just raised $33,000, which is something you've never done before. You did something you've never done. So did you stay? And if you did, why did you stay at your job where you had some success now that was happening on the side?
So I did stay, but only for a couple months.
Okay.
For me, I was like, I have to, first of all, leaving your full time to pursue your own thing, it is so scary. And so for me at the time, it was like, okay, I need to have X amount of money saved. I need this to happen first before I can get to that point. And I never got there. I had gotten to a point where I was just, it was more of a mental health thing where it was like, okay, I'm not devoting enough time to this thing that I'm passionate about. And I'm kind of just tired, exhausted, stressed. And so I ended up leaving. So it was supposed to be a month before the app launched. The app was supposed to launch in June of 2017.
Okay.
It didn't launch until the end of October. So that was also interesting because I was like, okay, I'll have some revenue to work with. And it was like, nope, you just got to work with this, 30 something K for the next couple of months.
And while all this was happening, did you ever feel imposter syndrome?
Oh, absolutely. I remember, so my first TEDx talk, I gave it in 2016. It was the first TEDx talk held at an HBCU. And that Kickstarter is what led to that because one of the organizers found me through the Kickstarter. So many opportunities came from that. But yeah, he asked me to give a TEDx talk on ownership. And at that point in time, I had never spoken like in front of an audience before. I had never done a panel event before. So I was like, you want me to speak about this thing? And yeah, that was probably the first time where I was just like, I don't feel like I'm knowledgeable enough or worthy enough to be on this stage giving a TEDx talk of all things.
Now, it sounds like to me from listening to your story, you started a Kickstarter campaign, you had no experience. You did a TEDx, you had no experience. You're starting a business, you had no experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so what kind of childhood did you grow up in? Did you have entrepreneurial parents that were encouraging and said, oh, become an entrepreneur? Like, why are you so fearless and what makes you fearless?
Oh, I like that. Okay. What makes me fearless? I feel like I've wanted to be an entrepreneur literally since junior high school. I remember I even had this little like sketchbook because I thought that I was going to have a clothing line. So I would make these little sketches. I even had a name. It was like Bulack, or it sounds hideous now, but it was supposed to be beautiful and black. So I feel like I've always had that entrepreneurial spirit. And what I didn't realize is that my grandmother was a business owner. She had a daycare in Bed-Stuy. She basically raised the whole neighborhood.
Oh, wow.
So I feel like it might have been in my blood, but I've always been someone who's wanted to do multiple things and have my own.
Now, did your parents ever encourage it? So did you say, you know what, I don't want to go to college. I want to be an entrepreneur?
So my parents did encourage it. So I went to business school. Undergrad. And even with that experience, running a business, like actually doing it is completely different ball game. You will learn the most when you're actually doing it. So I had the business experience. My parents were super supportive. I think I had the tendency to kind of jump from one thing to the next, even in the corporate world. So they were a little bit confused by that. But they were supportive, especially once other people started noticing. I was like, oh, okay, you're actually doing something out here.
What was your, you've had a lot of successes, and even, getting your parents on board is always the hardest part, not until they probably still don't know what you do exactly, right?
Yep.
They just know, oh, I just saw her here, or she's featured on Essence or Forbes, etc. So as you are, experiencing all this success, what was the moment for you where you felt like, okay, maybe this is a real business now?
I think, so there were two moments. The first one, this was maybe a few months before or after I launched the website. And so I wasn't monetizing because it was just a resource at that point in time. But I had grown this massive community. So I had business owners who had started to email me and ask like, okay, what are your advertising rates? So I was like, oh, okay, well, let me figure out advertising rates then. But I think that was the moment where it clicked, because it's like, okay, they find value in this. So there is like the community finds value in it, and then Black founders do as well. So there's something to it.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. And then as you are, okay, so now you feel like you're a business because you're making money, right? You're making,
Mhm.
people are reaching out, they're inquiring, you're making money.
Mhm.
And then you talk about this community that you've built. And so focusing on the community aspect first, how do you go about building a community on social? Because I
Mhm.
think your community was online. So
Mhm.
what did you do to build that community? And other entrepreneurs listening in, what advice can you give them
Mhm.
to help them build their communities online?
Um, this is a little cliche, but one, being consistent was a big one. When I started, this was probably at least the social pages. This was like 2015. And there were so many similar businesses that were out, or even pages that were out at that time, but they weren't consistent in the same way. So they just didn't keep up. So it was that, and then figuring out what my community wanted through trial and error. So posting different things, even posting different things in a text based, photo based, and seeing what they gravitate to more, and then providing them more of that.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you felt like you were posting like 3 to 5 times a day for like 4 years
Mm-hmm.
and to build that page up essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
why is consistency, was did it come easy for you, or why do you feel like it's so hard for entrepreneurs? Because when you tell them that, they're like,
Mm-hmm.
is that it? Like, no, what's the
Mm-hmm.
secret?
Yes, it is be consistent. I will say that my background before OBWS was in like digital marketing, so I
Mm,
already kind of had an idea of what to do in that space.
okay.
But yeah, consistency helps a lot. You have to stay top of mind.
Okay.
I mean, you say that all the time. Isn't there that one? There's that one quote stat where a customer has to see your ad how many times
Yeah, like seven,
before
ten
they actually
times.
purchase? Yeah.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with that. You have to be visible. I
Mm-hmm.
always say, if you're not top 10, you're forgotten. And
Mm-hmm.
you have to do the work. And I think that's what I'm trying to emphasize is that even before it all happened for you, and again, your page is about to hit 1 million on social media, you're making money now, you had to be really, really consistent in
Mm-hmm.
something that wasn't built yet.
Yeah.
Something that you didn't really see an example of it online
Mm-hmm.
and when you were building it. But now people see you as an example, right? When they are building
Mm-hmm.
a company similar, to the one that you have, et cetera. Now, when we focus on the opposite side of it, so you built this community
Mm-hmm.
and then you started monetizing.
Mm-hmm.
So you said, you know what, let me build a community. And then people started knocking on your door, say, okay, how much?
Mm-hmm.
So now on the other side, when you were first starting out, what were you, the first person that reached out to you, what were you thinking in terms of price?
Oh my God, that took so long for me to figure out. I will be honest and say that I probably underpriced because I was insecure about what I should price things at because it's like this is a social impacts business as well, although it's a for-profit and you need money to run things. So honestly, it took so much trial and error before I was comfortable with pricing. And it also took a lot of my friends, including you, talking to me about pricing because I knew that I had the tendency to go a little bit lower than what the value was.
Right, right.
Mm-hmm.
And so what's the business model now? Because I know that business models are really important to understand, like, because you could have charged your customers a one-time fee. You could have charged them a monthly subscription.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what's the business model from the...
I did all of that, by the way.
So you tested everything. And I think
Yep.
that's important. I think people sometimes believe that, okay, if I get it wrong, then that's it. I'm like, no, you could always change it.
Yeah, exactly. And the patience that comes with that is definitely a virtue because it didn't happen overnight. It was literally years of testing and trying things out and then failing and then trying something else out. So even in the everything was just a kind of not a slow and steady because we're definitely picking up, but it was like an overtime thing.
Gotcha. So when you're looking at, because you're at this really great intersection of community, you work a lot with entrepreneurs. So what are they experiencing? Because you're a provider now, right? Your platform acts as a marketplace. So what are these entrepreneurs experiencing? And let's start with when COVID hit and, last year, what were they going through and experiencing as you are front facing with them?
That was really tough. Because there were, of course, we have tons of brick and mortar and online based companies. But the brick and mortar businesses were really taking a hit. So for us, when all of this started and we realized that this was going to stay around for a minute, we kind of had to pivot and lean on our strategic partnerships in order to provide more resources to them. So that was tough because there were so many businesses in our network that were closing down. So even going on, the platform and, getting emails from entrepreneurs who were just like, we're kind of, we can cancel the membership. So that was really hard, especially trying to figure out ways to help. And it's such a big issue. So we did a lot where we raised funds. We gave away, I think last year it was like $35,000 to different businesses. We did a number of workshops. You were in one of them too. So it was, seeing businesses close down was the reason why I started this.
Yeah.
And it happens every day all across the country. But I had never seen it, accelerated in such a way.
Right. Yeah, I think last year was just so unique.
Mm-hmm.
And there were some businesses that, had their best years, but then most businesses were shutting down. Like even now when you start walking around, you're like, wait, I thought this business was here.
Yeah.
And a lot of, mom and pop brick and mortar stores started really closing. So when, it's been almost 12 months later,
Mm-hmm.
what do you see now that they're doing to whether prepare for the next, hopefully we don't have a next one, but what are you seeing them in their preparation now?
Mm-hmm. There's more attention to e-commerce. So even businesses that have a storefront, they're figuring out or using different platforms where they can either deliver things to people. So e-commerce is definitely a big thing. And I think we learned last year that you must have something online in order to, to sustain your business through times like that. So there are a lot more people who are looking into delivery platforms. And I feel like there are more people who are taking advantage of a lot of the opportunities that came out of that. It's definitely not where it was last year. And I think we all knew that was not going to continue. But there's still so many different programs and resources that are specifically for Black business owners, which is awesome.
And then as they're preparing, what are you seeing that is, so they have to go online? And I know there's probably resistance because some mom and pop stores don't want to go online,
older, yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
so what are they doing? Are they starting to learn themselves? Are they starting to outsource and hire people?
Mm-hmm.
Because I know your platform helps them be more visible online. And so what are some of the things that they're doing? Is it they're outsourcing this now, or what are they doing to prepare?
Most of them are outsourcing. At least a lot of the businesses that I've seen, again, mom and pop, they're a little bit older, so they're not as tech savvy. So a lot of them are outsourcing just to get something created online. I had spoken to so many mom and pop shops where it's like they don't have any type of social presence. They don't have anything online. And I'm like, in 2021, if you're not online, then do you exist?
Is it the education that you feel like they don't like? And people always say you have more information, you'll do better. I don't necessarily think that's true because some of us have more information and we don't do better.
Mm-hmm.
So is it the education aspect? Is it just they've been operating that way for 20 years without it, and why do I need to go? Like stubbornness, or like are some of them actually open and willing and saying, you know what, maybe I should learn this thing?
I think a lot more open because of last year, but I think it's more so we've been running this way for X amount of years. Unless they have like a son or a child or a grandchild who can do that stuff for them, they're not really. Also, you mentioned something, and I had a conversation with someone about this where it was like you're learning all of this, but you're not doing it. There is a major difference. I even have friends who, or one of my friends, hopefully she's not watching, but she's in the process of starting a business, and she will consume all of this information and listen to podcasts, read books. And I'm like, at one point, you got to do it. There's a difference between knowing and then doing.
Yeah, you have to take action. And I think most people get paralyzed
Mm-hmm.
and for a lot of different reasons, right? But the reason should not be because, you need to know all the information,
Mm-hmm.
because you'll never know all the information. You have to act, without all the information.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we do on a day-to-day in life. So why not do it in business, And so why, and bringing this back to you, because you decided to go into this space, and this space has gotten more challenging, and you see companies like Amazon, right? You see other marketplaces. When you look at these other marketplaces, are you looking at them as competitors? Are you looking at them as people you could collaborate with? Like, where are you at as a CEO? Where's your mindset at?
I was waiting for this question. It's a little bit of both. I'm not afraid of competition, so I don't mind it. And I mean, there was one thing or someone had pointed out to me, was like, when you go to a grocery store and you walk down the bread aisle, there are tons of breads there. They probably taste just about the same, but there's room for them all. So for me, I see it as an opportunity to partner, especially with larger brands that have much more funding than we do. So then at that point, it's like, okay, well, you can help out a Black-owned business by helping us, and then we'll help out, our community. So I kind of see it twofold. I recognize that they do have a lot of funds and a lot of market share. And so we benefit however we can, also keeping in the back of our mind that this is, it could be a competitor.
And when you look at it, Amazon's open to everyone, right? Why just Black businesses? Because I businesses I've ran in the past, when I've catered to a specific community of people, because I've believed they needed those resources more. Do you ever get people reaching out to you and say, why just Black business? Do people apply to be on your platform who are not Black businesses?
Oh, yeah. So we haven't gotten those emails in a minute, but I remember when I first started, especially with the Kickstarter, we had a couple of people who were like, oh, well, this is racist. Why would it just be Black-owned businesses? And I realized sometimes people can't relate to something, so you have to give them a scenario that they can. So even with that, I'm like, okay, we highlight women-owned businesses. We highlight veteran-owned businesses. Businesses owned by autistic people or people who are on the spectrum. And we do that because we know that those communities are marginalized and that they face more challenges when it comes to growing and launching a business. So Black-owned it's what's the difference?
Gotcha.
It's still a community that faces probably, well, I'm not going to compare, but we face a ton of challenges, and there's so many stats. Like when we go to get a bank loan, we're usually denied. When we do get those, even when we're equally qualified, I think the Washington Post said that the interest rate is like 32% higher.
Wow.
Not a 32% interest rate, higher 32%. So there are so many stats that really illustrate the fact that Black-owned businesses have all of these special hurdles that we have to jump through in order to get to the same space. And
so, a lot of these Black businesses, entrepreneurs, like we know even the stats around raising funding, less than 2%, and then for women, even less than that as well. And so do you think that, it's deterring people to become entrepreneurs, or do you feel like platforms like yours are really encouraging people to say, you know what, entrepreneurship for me, especially as a Black business owner, is something I should pursue?
One thing I love about my people is that we are not easily swayed when it comes to stuff like that. So even though those stats have been the case for years, I mean, Black women are the number one group of entrepreneurs, at least starting their businesses. So we're still here. I feel like I don't think I've seen a situation where an entrepreneur was like, oh, it's so difficult, we will find a way. Regardless of how many hoops we have to jump through, we will find a way to get it done.
No, and I think that's absolutely the case, especially over these last few years with digital, social media becoming so prevalent. Now there's a lot of, Black entrepreneurs that are online, and they're making a lot of money through their Instagram handles and through Twitter and social media, monetizing their brand and influencing and, YouTubing. And I think it's really good because it adds an additional layer, on, just the economy itself and other brick and mortar stores and trying to get them digital. And I think what you're doing is like, it's really, really important, right? Because you act as a central marketplace where people could be found. Now, because you're in this space, do you ever feel like what do you believe is your true purpose? Do you feel like this was your calling?
I do feel like this was my calling. Even before, I always felt like my calling was just to help people in some way. So I remember in college, I knew, of course, I went to business school, so I wanted to be an entrepreneur. But I thought that I would have a business related to like helping cancer patients or the families of cancer patients because of my grandparents. So I knew that that would be something I would focus on. It would be social impact based. But this was one of those things where I kind of just fell into it. And it just kept going from there. So I do feel like this was my passion or my purpose, because I believe that everything happens for a reason. And looking back, hindsight is always 2020. The way that things have transpired in my life, even getting that TEDx talk and never have given a speech before, sat on a panel. Launching the Kickstarter and never having experience with that, and just the domino effects. It can't be for nothing.
And those that are listening in now, and they see your brand today, and they're like, "Wow, she's so inspiring." And they're like, and that person raises their hand, they come up to the mic, and they say, what would you have told your younger self if you could go back, build this time machine, and talk to you? What words of wisdom or advice would you give your younger self?
I would say, if this was the younger entrepreneurial Mandy, I would say give yourself more grace. Being an entrepreneur, I remember when I had first started, I did this in Accelerator, and we did like this financial thing. And I was like, okay, cool. This was before I launched the app. I plugged the numbers in, was like, bam, I'm gonna make about $1 million in about 2 months. Perfect. And it did not go that way at all. So I think if I had known back then that it wouldn't be perfect, and that it would take time to figure things out, and that's okay, then I would have been a lot better off. It would have gotten rid of a lot of the stressing, a lot of the worrying about things, because it turned out, everything always turns out okay.
Yeah, and I think that's a really great piece of advice. I always think that if I had known all the information, it would paralyze me from even starting. And because I was just like, oh, like, why can't I do it? Going in there so novice and making a lot of mistakes. I wasn't as... I was hard on myself because that's my personality, but I would have been even much more harder and would have never started if I knew everything that it entailed in itself. And so I think that's really, really a really good piece of advice. Now,
I have one more.
Yeah, go ahead.
Learning how to ask for help. That was something that took me a very long time to do, to the point where, last year I had no choice but to ask for help. But it would have made my life a lot easier if I had gotten more comfortable asking people to help me out.
And why do you think that is? Or was?
That's a good question. I don't know. Being an entrepreneur, it is a lonely journey, because there are so many things that you kind of go through, and sometimes you're in a silo, especially when your head is down and you're working on things. And so for me, asking someone for help, it was just like, it seemed like such a big task for them to step in and help me with things. I don't know.
Yeah. What helped you get over that? Was it a book? Was it a show? What helped you get over that?
Stress. Last year, at the height of everything with George Floyd, everyone started wanting to buy Black. And so OBWS went viral. Our app downloads, following, the people sharing it, our signups. And at that point in time, this was just last year, there were like 2 people on my team, 2 or 3. And so I was still a person answering emails. I was still a person, doing strategy and all the day-to-day operations. So I remember at one point, one of my friends had called me, and she was like, oh, how are you? It was a casual conversation. And I just started crying. And that never happens. And that was the point where I was like, yeah, I need help.
No, that's good that you had that self-awareness, but even better, your friend that reached out and sort of
I
just
had no choice with her. She was like, I'm going to help you.
no, that's good. You need those type of people
Mhm.
in your life. And I think that's part of this entrepreneurial roller coaster because
Mhm.
everyone sees Official Black Wall Street. They see you and they always see your Instagrammable moments,
Mhm.
your features, your
Right.
collaborations, your
Mhm.
partnerships. But on the other side, there's also these challenges that you're going through in the business, but also with yourself.
Mhm.
Can you share any of the challenges or obstacles that you face and how to learn to overcome, or you still deal with today?
Mhm. Whew, so many. I think one big one that I'm still dealing with is so as an entrepreneur, there's like this grind culture where it's like you have to, team no sleep. I remember in the very beginning, I was working until like 3 a.m., 4 a.m. in the morning all the time. And so I finally got into a point where I was like, wait a minute, although this is my passion, I didn't want to feel overworked. I didn't want to experience burnout, which I feel like I kind of am a little bit right now. And so it took a very, very long time for me to try to unlearn some of the things where it's like, no, you don't have to work 24/7, 7 days a week. Even now, what I'm trying to do is create a 4-day work week for everyone at OBWS. So for me, I still feel guilty when I don't work, even if it's a day off. So that's one of the hurdles that I'm still trying to get over, just figuring out what work-life balance looks like and then creating boundaries so that I actually stick to it and make time for myself.